U.S. Farm Report, brought to you by World Dairy Expo, where the global dairy industry meets. Mark your calendars for the 2023 event, Sunday, October 1st through Friday, October 6th in Madison, Wisconsin. And learn more at worlddairyexpo.com.
Welcome back to World Dairy Expo, here for our marketing roundtable discussion. And Mike North, Dan Basse, as well as Scott Brown joining us. All right, let's start real quick. Before we take a deep dive into dairy, Mike, when you look at grain stocks and the grain stocks report that we saw last week from USDA, definitely set a bearish tone in the soybean market. What was the biggest shocker when it comes to stocks?
Well, obviously, the change of yield on last year's crop was the thing that, reverberated back through the stocks report. Raising it gave it a bearish tone relative to what we saw in corn and set it apart that moment. Bottom line, though, is, as I tell everybody else, that change didn't take us out of this tight environment. All it did was surprise the traders. So reality is we're still relatively tight, so don't look for that to be a long-term bearish factor.
Well, Dan, I know you're keeping a close eye on what's happening with Russia and Ukraine as we see the rhetoric heat up. We see some of those actions now coming out. What does it mean possibly for then production for 2023 when it comes to grain out of that area?
Yeah, so if we think about our friends in Ukraine, and I talked there this morning, and we think wheat plantings are down 40%, winter wheat plantings. They're now just starting to cut their corn. Yields are not up to expectations, but we believe the Ukrainians will be relatively aggressive in offering corn. A little different this morning is there's a lot of discussion in European grain markets that maybe the corridor will not be closed down on November 22nd. Putin may be relenting a little on that, or maybe he's getting pushed into a corner to a degree. He doesn't have the manpower to defend it. But the UN and others are talking more favorably about the corridor. We'll see if it stays open. It's a political decision from Putin, but it's something to watch because Ukraine today has 65 vessels waiting to load. That's the most we've seen in a year and a half. So they are trying to get grain out.
Well, they're trying, but all of this is just adding to this bullish rhetoric when it comes to grain prices. And if you look at feed prices on the dairy side, I mean, it's ugly. We see DMC payments being triggered. When you look at the margins right now for dairy producers, if feed costs do stay at this level, how concerned are you heading into 2023?
So somewhat concerned, I think, Tyne, because when you look at where milk prices have gone, we've been coming off of the highs that we would have had a few months ago, and all of a sudden the tightness in what we see on the grain side certainly tells me we're going to keep feed costs high. Dry weather has kept hay prices, alfalfa prices, very high as well. So it looks like to me, we have more issues, more reasons to be concerned as we start into 2023.
Yeah, so is there enough right now to support milk prices where they are today or even push them higher, Mike?
For the short term, absolutely. We have an aggressive bid, and you'll see this predominantly around butter. Domestically, we have a strong bid in that particular market. But elsewhere, this is the time of the year when the retailer and end user is trying to fill the pipeline to make sure that all of us get to enjoy the holidays the way we always have.
Well, speaking of the holidays, though, reading some stories about consumers looking at cutting back on some of that spending just due to inflation and really, preparing for that holiday season. Is it impacting dairy demand at all, Dan?
We're not seeing it in the data just yet. I mean, the data is pretty clear. Even at $3 plus butter prices, we're not seeing any demand destruction. Where I'm a little worried about is the strength of the U.S. dollar having an impact on exports. We are seeing it, whether it be grain or dairy or other things, maybe depending on the commodity, being down 7 to 20%. So the strong dollar is having an impact. It will transfers to maybe capping rallies down the road, but I agree with Mike. I don't see any downside risk, at least at the moment.
Well, in the World Trade Organization coming out this week, and they're concerned about world trade. Do you think that dairy specifically is better positioned to weather some of these headwinds on the world trade, especially where you see where the dollar is today, Scott?
So I think in many ways there's not a lot of great competition in the rest of the world, and the U.S. still is positioned, I think, to fill some markets. Yes, the dollar being strong is one of the issues that may keep us from maybe growing as much as we want, but there's not a lot of competition coming from Oceania, the EU, other traditional countries that we would have been competitors in world markets.
Do you see that changing, Mike?
I think as we work our way into 2023, the landscape could shift a little bit, but the production in Europe, the production in the Oceania region is not there. Oceania's starting off another 3 to 4% lower. The environmental policies of Europe are keeping cows from coming back into the herd, and then you couple that with an energy crisis and a historic drought and the lack of feed that will be a byproduct of that. It'll make them tough to compete in that regard. I think the bigger challenges will be more along the lines of the inflationary pressures and recession that you spoke of earlier.
Yeah, it's not just feed prices. Feed availability has definitely been an issue for some dairy producers in the room. So we'll try to navigate some of these transportation issues, not out of the clear yet, even when it comes to rail. So we'll need to talk about that. But first, we need to take a quick break, and then we'll have much more right here on U.S. Farm Report.